I want to illustrate to you a practical illustration of a great rabbi who lived in our generation, at least in the Lithuanian community. His name is Rabbi Kanievsky, Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky. He authored the book Shekel HaKodesh. And an illustration of what? An illustration of a Torah scholar who lacks understanding, worse than a carcass, as Professor Leibowitz phrased it, or in my opinion more aptly put by the Rambam, who said in his essay on the resurrection of the dead, all these rabbis who know and are familiar with the journey and gift of the Talmud, but they are not thinking people. They think, they imagine, and they study the Talmud or they study the Bible and think that God has a body, has the form of a body. And then he says, these are fools who are worse than animals. That is how he defines all the rabbis who did not study philosophy and did not think about the definition of God, but learned it from the literal text. So Rabbi Kanievsky, who was born in 1928 and passed away in 2022, 3 years ago, he was considered the most influential rabbi, at least in the Lithuanian community, and even prime ministers or those aspiring to become prime ministers would consult with him. A rabbi who lived on Rashbam Street in Bnei Brak and simply studied the Talmud all day, wrote books, and didn't know his right from his left. And this is a wonderful example because he actually wrote a book dealing with astronomy. And he explained all the laws of sanctifying the new month, all the paths of the stars, the calculations of the new moon, the seasons of the year, and the length of the year in general, and the calendar as a whole, all these wonderful things. He wrote a work called Shekel HaKodesh on Maimonides, and in the introduction he explains why he is doing this. It sounds a bit apologetic, because why is he starting to deal with astronomical calculations? What is this all about? So he explains in his introduction that, first of all, in order to study all the movements of the renewal of the moon and the length of the year, the seasons, he also uses the terms seasons and zodiac signs, which is an ancient concept that is not relevant today. The concept of zodiac signs does not exist in modern astronomy. In any case, he says two things about why he deals with this at all. One, because it is written both in the Talmud and by the early rabbis like the Meiri, who says the following, and he quotes the Meiri, it is a mitzvah for a person to seclude himself in the ways of the movements of the stars and to contemplate the seasons and zodiac signs. The Meiri lived around the 13th to 14th century. Because this wisdom is a magnificent wisdom in knowing the signs of the heavens and the gathering of the lights without any error. And about this it is said, and you shall keep and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the eyes of the nations. Which is the wisdom and understanding that is in the eyes of the nations? This calculation. Seasons and zodiac signs, fine. With me, Elia. Again, I said zodiac signs are no longer present in the modern world, but the calculation of the course of the year is indeed a modern matter. So, one reason he explains why he writes about this is because it is wisdom and your understanding. So look, see the Jews, how wise they are, they understand astronomy. And the second reason he gives is that there are rabbis who believe that the very calculation and knowledge of the movement of the stars, their paths, and the calendar is a mitzvah from the Torah. He brings the Baal Halachot Gedolot, who counts this as one of the 613, one of the Taryag mitzvot. I'm smiling because it's very amusing. And then he comes and seemingly asks a question in the introduction. Wait, but all the laws of sanctifying the new month, Maimonides says that all these things he wrote from the Gentiles. All the calculations in the last chapters of sanctification of the new month are from the Gentiles. So it's not exactly your wisdom and understanding in the eyes of the nations. It's the wisdom of the Gentiles in the eyes of the nations. So he says, nevertheless, because Maimonides wrote it, even though he wrote it because he learned the Ptolemaic astronomy, look, all the astronomy he knew was Ptolemaic astronomy, where the earth stands still, and the sun and all the stars move in their orbits around the earth, and the earth is at the center. So he says, nevertheless, once Maimonides wrote it, it became Torah, truly. And whoever studies them is studying Torah. Therefore, even though it's as if it comes from the Gentiles, since it passed through Maimonides' filter, it is considered a matter of Torah. That means that if you study the astronomy of the Gentiles, it is considered a matter of Torah, because Maimonides already wrote it in the Mishneh Torah. So it is considered words of Torah and not the study of the words of the Gentiles. Now, why do I define him as lacking understanding? Because in his book he constantly interprets Maimonides according to Maimonides' view, which is the Ptolemaic view, where the earth floats, the sun revolves around it, and all the stars revolve around it, and he even draws illustrations. He explains, and the whole book is based on the old world view, he explains why there are differences in the seasons of the year, and says that the sun's revolution around the earth is not around the exact point of the earth. He even draws a diagram showing that it is not exactly at the center point. The two circles here, one is the circle of the zodiac signs. He still refers to the zodiac signs. He insists on this in the 21st century. It's simply unbelievable. And he says that the sun has a different center that it revolves around. And it's not exactly the central point of the sun. That's why there are differences in the length of the seasons. Now, he doesn't mention even once the astronomical revolution that actually completely abolished Ptolemaic astronomy. Completely abolished it. He didn't mention Copernicus, who was a Polish Gentile and essentially a revolutionary thinker who said, wait, all these things I'm seeing and the whole Ptolemaic theory don't fit with the orbits of the stars because the stars are revolving exactly in the opposite direction from how they're supposed to according to it. The Ptolemaic theory, according to astronomy, was established by Ptolemy. Then he came up with a revolutionary idea and said, maybe we are revolving around the sun and not the sun around us. This revolution needed time to be digested. It's not like people suddenly change their minds, especially against intuition. Our human intuition tells us that the sun revolves around us, and it took a process. Then after Copernicus, in the Tycho Brahe, who was also a Czech non-Jew, was a revolutionary observer because he established an observation system over many years with an accuracy of 1 degree for every star's orbit. He was simply such a meticulous person, living between 1546 and 1601 after Copernicus. Then, after him, after he came and documented all his observations of the stars, then came the revolutionary mathematician Johannes Kepler, who lived between 1571 and 1630. A giant mathematician, and the whole revolutionary idea of Copernicus, he expressed it in mathematical laws. According to Kepler's mathematical laws, it is possible to predict the paths of the stars with great accuracy even to this day. Today, of course, we have advanced, and the fourth person who essentially developed and completely paved the way for the astronomical world as we know it today is Galileo Galilei, who knew how to use the telescope for observations and even improved and enhanced the vision through the telescope, not just by a mirror, not just by our own eyesight, but actually began to look through the telescope and saw that Jupiter also has a moon. There are moons of Jupiter. Then he said, wait a minute, not everything revolves around the earth as we thought, but rather the opposite. There are other things that revolve around the planet Jupiter, which also has moons. He saw other things that contradicted all of Ptolemy's astronomy. And in fact, we simply opened up to humanity stars at light years away, galaxies. We simply find ourselves in a world so different from the astronomical perception of the Ptolemaic model. And then a rabbi from Bnei Brak, in his mercy, writes a book about astronomy and literally doesn't mention Copernicus, not Tycho Brahe, not Johannes Kepler, not Galileo Galilei, not to mention scientists who were right next to him at Bar Ilan. Astronomy at Bar Ilan, you could go from Bnei Brak to Bar Ilan, Mr. Kanievsky, ask the astronomer, go to Professor Zvi Mazel, who I think even discovered a star that was previously unknown. And just look on YouTube at the differences in perspective. Listen to what Professor Zvi Mazel says, who is also a religious man, and explains the differences between Ptolemy, between the old astronomical worldview and the Copernican revolution. But he sat in Bnei Brak, secluded in his home, reading, drawing illustrations according to the old student perspective, as if nothing had changed. This is exactly a Torah scholar who lacks understanding, whom even a carcass is better than, because he used the abilities he has and the time he was given for nonsense and vanities that have already been disproven for hundreds of years by observation, and he doesn't even mention them. So what does this lead to? He comes and claims that he wrote the book because this is your wisdom and understanding in the eyes of the nation. But what he actually did was to show the foolishness and stupidity of the rabbis in the eyes of the public.